All right, now the latest on the Iran war in reaction to the president's speech last night. Let's bring in Firas Maqsad, Eurasia Group Managing Director for Middle East and North Africa. It's good to see you this morning. Thanks, Firas, for joining us.
My pleasure, Joe.
What do you think the president said last night that was different than what we were thinking earlier in the day and earlier in the week about the Strait and what happened with WTI and Brent today? What came out that it's going to stay closed longer?
Yeah, Joe, I think this was primarily a communication exercise targeting the domestic audience, because from a policy perspective, the president, if anything, only reaffirmed what most of us already understood, namely that this war will go on for at least another 2 to 3 weeks, perhaps a bit longer, to achieve its mission. He reiterated what the objectives are: to further degrade Iran, its ballistic missile program. He's sunk his navy, re-obliterating the nuclear program, what's left of it after the 12-day war. But I would argue that there is an unstated objective, at least he didn't highlight that yesterday, which is what the president has referred to as taking Iran's oil. He's made that clear as an objective as late as Monday in an interview with the Financial Times. But in terms of timeline and objectives, there wasn't much that's there. I think we're going to be heading towards a very important inflection point mid-April in that 2 to 3 week time frame that he outlined, which is when the president will decide whether to go for the maximalist approach and try to seize control of Iran's oil. A lot of the military assets that are currently still on the way to the region, the USS Bush, some other Marines, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, elements of the 82nd Airborne, those don't get there until mid-April. And the president is going to have to make a decision whether he wants to go all in or whether he wants to take an off-ramp. And I think the domestic standing here in the U.S., the impact, the energy impact, but also Iran's residual military capabilities are going to be key factors.
Right. That's what I've been thinking for us, that we have no idea. And when we have these brief periods where we think things are winding down and the objectives have been met, we never know whether that's what the president, that's what he wants to signal as a head fake to Iran, to whomever is trying to follow along. I don't think we have any idea. And there could be some major, as you say, inflection point a couple of weeks from now, and we have no idea what that might be. But there's a lot of things moving into the area that make me wonder whether we're actually seeing things pull back or whether they're going to ramp up even more so.
Yeah, Joe, I would argue to you that every time the president has chosen to deploy military assets, whether it was in the 12-day war against Iran some year and a half ago, or whether it was against Maduro in Venezuela, and then the lead up to this war, he's actually used those military assets once they're in theater. Also, I would say that there's a clear, discernible strategy here in terms of communication. The president time and again has said that he is in touch with the Iranians, that the channels are open, that they're negotiating, that the Iranians want a deal, only to back away from that. I think it's in the interest of the administration to try and manage oil prices, manage the markets, keep them under control in order to prosecute this war longer and further degrade Iran's military capabilities. So if we see a lot of back and forth in terms of what the administration is signaling, it's part of that strategy of actually trying to manage the markets. It's not necessarily indicative of where the president is going. I'm watching the military deployments much closer than I'm actually watching and indexing around what the president is saying.
And just in terms of trying to get into the president's psyche, when you look at the period when he wasn't president to where he came back, there was a lot of adversity, obviously. And a lot of times I don't think he cares what's being said about him or I know he does, but I think he's going to do things based on what he's going to do. And it makes me think, even if there isn't in this country, if there's memories of Iraq and if there's no stomach for casualties and all these things, I think that he might do it anyway, just based on what he thinks is necessary and needs to be done long term for that part of the world, which is why I don't think anything's off the table.
I happen to agree. It's actually astonishing that we're talking about ground troops and Marines being deployed to the region. I mean, this is a president that time and again has
I know.
messaged no forever wars in the Middle East, certainly no ground troops in the Middle East. And yet here we are, thousands of American Marines and soldiers on their way to the region. I think to put this in a broader context, been fixated with this idea of controlling the oil, whether it's Maduro's oil in Venezuela or even prior to that it was in Syria, and justifying the residual American presence there as having to do with the oil. And certainly when it comes to Iran, that's part of the messaging that has popped up every once in a while. And perhaps this is something that has to do with great power competition with China. I don't think that the president was delighted to see the Chinese so successfully weaponize their control of the critical mineral supply chain, and greater control over the globe's, the world's oil reserves is something that continues to animate Donald Trump.
As a businessman and now as obviously the president, you're right. Oil, minerals, it's all based on economic implications because there's no strength without a strong economy. It almost goes hand in hand. All right, for us, what is it? Today's, I keep it figuring out. Today's
April 2nd.
The 2nd?
After April.
You're talking mid-April is when does everything arrive? What in your calculus that you're talking
Different
about?
things arrive at different times. There's already a Marine unit that is just outside the Straits. The second is, I'm told, due to arrive next week. And then we're waiting for the carrier. And the carrier, the best estimates out there that I've seen from military planners is, again, around that mid-April timeframe. So that's the moment to watch. It's the go, no-go moment for President Trump, and whether he wants to begin to go for the off-ramp or try to take the oil.
Very good. All right. Thanks for us. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you before then, I hope.
My pleasure.
All right, very quickly.